Good afternoon, everyone. Carousel Technology would like to welcome you to our ServiceNow webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items. The audio portion of this webinar is being recorded, and it can be heard through your computer speakers, or if you prefer, you can listen through your phone using the dial-in option displayed on your screen. Please note all lines have been muted to reduce any kind of background noise during this presentation. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A pod on the left-hand side of your screen, and we'll do our best to answer the questions at the end of the presentation. If not, we'll make sure to follow up with you offline. This webinar is recorded, and we will send a copy emailed to you afterwards. Just to tell you a little bit about Carousel, we are a trusted government IT solutions provider delivering software support solutions to federal, state, and local government agencies, as well as education and healthcare. Carousel maintains dedicated teams to support sales and marketing for all of its vendors, including ServiceNow, Google, F5 Networks, and Adobe. Our contact information will be displayed at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to reach out, give us a call, or send us an email. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers for today. We have John Stabb, Tyler Robinson, Bill Munson, and Matt Fisher, all with ServiceNow today. Team, the floor is all yours.
All right, thank you. And good morning and good afternoon. So ServiceNow is changing the way government works across a multitude of missions. And today, we're bringing to attention empowering fast and effective IT responses to vulnerabilities. So my name is Tyler Robinson. I'm one of your speakers today on this webinar. And with me, I have John Stabb. He is one of our security operations solutions specialists, as well as Bill Munson and Matt Fisher to support in the technical discussion and demonstrations. So today we're going to cover a little bit about what is the ServiceNow platform and how is IT workflows aligned to supporting the government mission. We're going to set the stage a little bit with also some polling questions, kind of see where we're at, what your thoughts are in your guys' environment, and then we're going to move into a technical discussion demonstration about how does IT operations and vulnerability come together from an operational perspective as well as a security landscape, and provide a slight demo of how we bring everything together. So what is ServiceNow? ServiceNow, at the core foundation, is a workflow automation platform. It's built on one single platform with one data model under one architecture. And we allow workflow to be processed across the mission space, whether it's in the one shop or the six shop, or it's in the civilian space where we have citizen developers that are creating intellectual property and allowing each one of those business units to come together across the mission itself. We bring a configuration management database along with knowledge base and service catalogs and apply it with machine learning and artificial intelligence to seamlessly affect the workflow processes. What we do is we actually focus on three critical workflows, one in the IT space, one in the employee space, and one in the customer workflow space. Bringing all of those together on the platform allows me to seamlessly integrate and provide interoperability. But if those workflows don't necessarily align to the mission itself, we can extend the platform by using our app engine. But we also understand that ServiceNow isn't going to be the dedicated only system of record. There's other mandated systems of records within our landscape. So providing that interface and the connectivity between those systems of records, let's say something like ACAS, for instance, as well as providing the security and vulnerability workflows, this is where I start aligning those workflows into the mission and allow it to provide capabilities. So it isn't just the fact of having a platform in place, but also having that continuity or that great experience that allows for my employees and my customers to be able to interact with the data as well as the user experience. So in altogether, ServiceNow provides those seamless capabilities for being a platform of platforms. So today, we're going to really just focus on that IT workflow. And across the IT workflow, we are most known for our IT service management capabilities. But if I extend outside of IT service management, today we're really going to just focus on the IT operations space as well as the security operations, specifically around vulnerability response. So let's start with a few polling questions. Let's test your knowledge. Polling question 1. What percentage of organizations claim that they have been breached in the last year? We'll give a couple more seconds here.
Boy, it's quite a mix, Tyler.
Quite a mix. All right.
Quite a mix, yeah.
All right, let's go on to polling question number 2. Who is responsible for patching systems in your organization?
Needs to get the poll up. There it is.
All right, we'll give a couple more seconds.
Interesting.
All right. And last but not least, let's do polling question number 3. So what are the average number of hours spent each week patching systems and fixing related systems?
But folks are thinking this one through, Tyler.
Okay. I'll give them a few more minutes. Let me know when you're ready.
All right. We got about 70% of the folks.
All right, I think we got a good capture of the polling question. So let's kind of recap a little bit. So the first question, it's really around 50% of organizations that were breached in the past year. And when phenomena, yeah, there you go. We'll go with that one.
Put them on.
Yeah, thank you. Query the operations space, 31% are actually responsible for patching within IT operations, which is actually the highest percentage of security and IT functions as a whole. And then if you think about it, roughly 205 average hours were spent patching vulnerabilities and fixing related systems. So if we're spending that many amount of hours, how do we move to be more of proactive versus reactive? So I'm going to transition to John to kind of cover how does ServiceNow support the capabilities of taking these average hours and decreasing them and then moving to more of a proactive state. So John,
Great.
it's all you.
Great. Thank you very much, Tyler. And hello, everyone. This is John Stabb. I solution sales for our security operations part of the platform. If we go back and revisit kind of the results from the polling questions here, actually it's pretty interesting results. It looks like most of you thought that most agencies have been breached. 3/4 of the agencies that were breached within the last year. Actually, it's 50%. And the IT operations team, clearly that is a group that is doing most of the remediation. And only 1/4 of you got the number of hours, right, the 205 hours. But anyhow, you can go back to the next slide, Tyler. Kind of setting the stage for the core message of today's webinar. It's empowering an agency to have faster and more efficient IT response to vulnerabilities. And with that, and from what we've just learned here, we know that SecOps, security operations, and IT operations teams are typically separate groups with different priorities But we also know there's a lot of overlap when dealing with vulnerability response. And even though SecOps owns the vulnerabilities, almost a third of the organizations rely on the IT ops team for patching. And patching vulnerability takes on average over 200 hours per week for IT teams. Right? Clearly, this is a major effort and time for a team, an IT team that doesn't own vulnerability response in theory and often has limited visibility. So you go to the next slide. And typically, there's a clear break between the responsibilities of the security and the IT teams when dealing with vulnerability response. Right? On the left-hand side, you'll see security operations teams are focused on the triage, exposure of vulnerability response, which includes the identification, validation, and prioritization of vulnerabilities for the organization. On the right-hand side, the IT operations team focuses on coordinating workflows to remediate or fix the risk by assigning tasks, managing workflows, and remediating the vulnerability. The biggest challenge, as you can see, lies in the middle with the handoff. Right? Typically, teams are using different spreadsheets and start the process with emails or a phone call to hand off the issue. But the gap between the IT operations teams and the security operations teams causes problem with a lack of consistent and collaborative data. For example, the SecOps team might have the highest risk prioritization to vulnerability A, which is extremely dangerous, but an IT ops reality might have a minimal effect on one remote service, while a lower prioritized vulnerability might have a massive risk for the majority of critical services for the organization. Essentially, without the right business service context, the IT ops would have actually worked on the least dangerous issue first. Next slide. Okay, so there's several challenges to visibility, risk, and efficiency. For visibility, most organizations have siloed tools which cause inconsistent visibility because the CMDB has poor quality of data, which limits its value. In addition, the sheer number of patches and IT assets causes more issues with manual processes and a lack of visibility. In the middle, we all know that there's a heightened risk due to the number and severity of vulnerabilities each and every day. It's not enough to just look at a list of prioritization when you don't have the individual business context of the vulnerability. And once prioritization is assigned, agencies often have slow and insufficient vulnerability patching across the IT estate. Finally, if you look to the right-hand part of the slide, extensive and slow manual processes add more risk of vulnerabilities across the board. Since security defines but IT remediates, any delay or misinformation in the handoff is still danger and risk. And once the vulnerability is remediated, often organizations fail to document the changes in a closed-loop process, which has more challenges for reporting of success. Next slide. Thank you, Tyler. Challenges are highlighted in a simple workflow that impacts the majority of enterprises today. Green represents automated processes, while purple highlights the manual processes. The first two steps are typically automated, where a vulnerability scanner like Tenable or Tenable ACAS across the DoD provides a detailed list of vulnerabilities which are fed into a database or a spreadsheet. The first delay comes when a security operations staff member must look through the massive amount of vulnerability data to prioritize and assign. Typically, they're challenged with a CMDB with limited and out-of-date data and the sheer quantity of vulnerability-related data. Assignments are then made to the vulnerability response team for further action. The next delay occurs with the decision to remediate or defer each and every vulnerability. Many times, this becomes a vicious cycle across the team members trying to know who has the best information and data to make the decision and decide if and who to transfer the ticket to. Each handoff between staff members adds more time and uncertainty while the SLA clock is ticking. Some vulnerabilities might be deferred while others go on to the ticketing process. And depending on the agency's ITSM maturity, the change ticket will be updated manually or potentially automated. Once the change occurs, the ticket should be closed and the SLA clock starts ticking. So this chart hopefully highlights some of the pain of manual processes in such a massive and challenging environment. Next slide. So with ServiceNow, ServiceNow IT operations and ServiceNow vulnerability response, we empower fast and effective IT response to vulnerabilities. There's three key pillars to achieve this outcome. First, get an immediate understanding of risk for IT resources. Next, we reduce risk with frictionless workflows, transfer of data, and vulnerability prioritization. And finally, the speed time to fix with SecOps and IT ops collaboration. Next slide. So a key use case highlights how to drive real-time visibility by starting with an understanding of your operational landscape. While there are many potential discovery and data sources available, the challenge lies with taking the plethora of information and understanding the relationship of the business services. At ServiceNow, we not only have the ability to discover your resources, but more importantly, also will map them into context with the business. In addition, our service maps can be enhanced with data from third-party monitoring sources, such as application performance tools, which understand and map application environments. Our ultimate goal is to bring all these sources together to provide the most accurate, real-time view of your business services. We call this our business-aware data layer. This layer allows operational decisions to be made in context of business services. The business-aware data layer is invaluable for critical operational processes. This provides outcomes including creating a mature CMDB with a centralized data repository with IT discovery, service mapping, and vulnerability data to eliminate silos. 2, diminishing unplanned risk with configuration policy compliance for consistency. Finally, visualizing business service context to understand potential impact. Now, across the IT estate and vulnerability data with a single correlated platform. Next slide. So once we have a solid foundation provided by the visibility of ServiceNow, we can then look into sharing of data, prioritization, and empowering frictionless workflows. With ServiceNow, you can understand the relationship between business context, vulnerability severity, and exploitation for a full holistic understanding. You can prioritize and take action on the most critical vulnerabilities first, and you can streamline patch management with threat intelligence as part of IT workflow and runbook processes. Next slide. So by eliminating the gaps of the CMDB visibility and accuracy, as well as helping prioritize the vulnerabilities based on business context, ServiceNow helps leverage automation to speed time to fix, utilizing collaboration. Instead of the manual processes across disjointed tools, ServiceNow has visibility, prioritization, and patching in a continuous lifecycle process, which helps eliminate inaccurate spreadsheets and disjointed email processes with multiple handoffs and change workflow, reducing manual tasks and speed patching by automatically assigning responsibility to the right IT staff, and proves success easily with closed-loop reporting across IT operations and security teams. Next slide, Kyle. So if we remember, go back to one of the earlier slides, when we went through the workflow, you can see a big change here with the use of ServiceNow IT operations and vulnerability response. Now with the right information, spreadsheets and legacy databases can be replaced with automated information flow, the APIs, which flow into automated prioritization, an ownership assignment powered by automated CI matching for business criticality risk prioritization, an assignment group for ownership instead of just putting it into a pool of staff and waiting for the right person to grab it. Then the vulnerabilities are set based on prioritization and staff assignment. The responsible person works on the respective vulnerabilities, each with its own SLA. And finally, the vulnerability goes into an IT workflow to fix the issue, close the ticket, and stop the clock on the SLA. This chart and workflow, now that's been updated, utilizing ServiceNow, truly highlights the power of the platform and automation. So with that, enough slides for me. I'm going to transition over to Bill and to Matt, who are going to go through a bit of a demonstration.
Good morning, everybody. This is Bill Musson. I am a solution consultant for the IT operations management team. I am joined with my coworker, Matt Fisher, who is also a solution consultant on the security team. And we together are going to show you a little bit about how vulnerability response and IT operations can work together. Tyler, if you could go to the one slide that I'd like to talk about. John did a terrific job of discussing the problem. I mean, truthfully, in my past, and I think realistically in your environments, security and operations management tend to be in their own segregated worlds. And when the security team is been made aware of or discovers that there's a vulnerability in their environment, then of course we start seeing the whole war room gets stood up or emails get shot out, spreadsheets are made, and unfortunately that communication process is very disjointed and very difficult sometimes to track. Did I truly get that particular system remediated, or the time to remediate is increased because the communication process isn't efficient. Now, the whole idea behind this slide really is, can we all just get along and work together as a team? And through the ServiceNow platform, we have the ability to tie all this information together through the use of workflows to not only improve that communication between the teams and be able to track what's being done, but also be able to automate a lot of the processes that normally would be done manually, and thereby increasing the speed in which we're able to remediate that particular vulnerability and to properly be able to report on it. So what I would like to do is turn this over to Matt Fisher, who is going to start the discussion on vulnerability response, and I'll let him take it away.
Hey gang, Matt Fisher. Give me 1 second while I share Safari. Can everyone see my browser?
Yep.
Outstanding. Hey, welcome everyone. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to spend it with us. My name is Matt. I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of our vulnerability response product. And, I've been in security for a long time. I just want to kind of emphasize some of the stuff that other folks have been saying. When I was a contractor and I worked in a security team, working cross lines of business was always really challenging. So there's a lot of things about the ServiceNow platform that I really, really love. But from kind of a business perspective, one of the things I love about it is it brings so many different aspects of IT management together. Your operational management, your service management, your security management, even your risk management and RMF and stuff like that, all in one platform where data can flow very easily, work can flow very easily. So it really does drive that kind of cooperation. I want to show you a couple dashboards just very quickly and give you an idea of what kind of visualization you can get out of vulnerability response and ServiceNow as a whole. This is just kind of a cyber risk dashboard where we've gone through and we're expressing vulnerabilities with known exploits by their business impact. And this really is taking advantage of that asset database, that CMDB, but that very unique aspect of our CMDB and our discovery capabilities, which is the ability to map not just assets from a technical perspective of this thing sits here in this rack and talks to this, but roll it up to business services, or what we would call a program, and understanding something about that program and being able to leverage that in our automation and our reports. And so to me, this is a pretty cool widget because we're bringing all of that together. We're bringing threat intelligence of if a vulnerability is a known exploit or not, along with scan results, ACAS results or other sources of vulnerabilities, and that business service information. And then we have some other tabs.
Hey Matt,
here.
can you enlarge that a little bit?
Yep. And then we have some other tabs here where we can do things like look at unauthorized software.
Great.
But let me move over to another dashboard here that's focused more specifically on vulnerabilities. Now, this is kind of an out-of-the-box dashboard that I modified a little bit. So we have things like vulnerable items by their risk rating, vulnerable items by their remediation target. That's what we call the SLA. When a vulnerability comes in, we have rules that you can view and modify and create your own and change that say, hey, this vulnerability needs to be fixed in 7 days or 12 days. We call that a remediation target. So here we can visualize what's going on by the remediation targets and when the bulk of the work needs to be done and sort. But then I did a little trick. I hit this plus button over here, and I just went through and I added some additional content here. It's very easy to customize dashboards and build new widgets or add whatever widgets you want. And I added some more information from the operational side of the house, which I think in many environments would be kind of hard to get to. But I just went in and added some widgets that were looking at our assets as a whole. So these aren't necessarily assets for the vulnerabilities. I just, as a vulnerability person, I always kind of wonder, like, how much Windows do we have versus Linux versus Unix, Mac OS, and other stuff. And that's what this is showing me. And this is just showing me my business services operational status. So again, just some high-level visualization capabilities that are built into the platform. So this works the same wherever you're moving through the platform and gives you some really easy ways to build your own dashboards and reports. Now, talking about vulnerabilities specifically, vulnerabilities, we tend to think of vulnerabilities as coming from Tenable Security Center, from ACAS scans. But, vulnerabilities exist in your network before they're found by ACAS or not. So we have a couple of different ways of registering vulnerabilities. One of which is you can just search your software inventory and type in descriptions of the software and then see where that software exists. And then you can create vulnerable item records from there. We call it an exposure assessment, and that's a great way to do things like respond to a cyber tasking order, or if you get some sort of order coming down from DHS going, hey, everyone look for the CVE on your network, it's a bad thing. You can do this without necessarily waiting for the vulnerability scans to come around. Now, when it does come to vulnerability scans, though, John talked about that process a little bit. Scans are happening all over the place. And if you're old like me, you remember when scanning was hard, when it was, Nessus, and then Tenable was formed, and they came out with Security Center. And we're still trying to wrap our arms around literally how to build a scanning infrastructure and get scans going on a regular basis. That problem's been mostly solved a long time ago, and the challenge now is, ACAS is just spitting out tons of stuff at us. We have these other sources of vulnerability. We have endpoints that are spitting information at us. We have these, responses to CTOs, and managing that response and managing that volume is really hard. And to me, from a security perspective, managing vulnerabilities is extremely critical to security. That's not the only thing you have to do. So in my opinion, anything you can do to make vulnerability management easier, more effective, and more efficient, that just means more people you can have hunting for APTs. And so it's a win-win in my book. Now, this is a list of all vulnerable items in the system. And in ServiceNow, you can do lots of different things with lists. You can sort them, you can group them, you can filter them, et cetera. And so what I did is I just went ahead and used this filter capability to search for vulnerable items that were created specifically by Tenable Security Center. And then I just hit a little create favorite and added it to my favorite bars. So I built a customized view of that list because I really wanted to show actual Tenable Security Center vulnerabilities here. Now, this is coming from our test lab, which is pretty small. It's a pretty small lab. We're doing our best to kind of give you what it would look like with ACAS, but in terms of vulnerabilities and the machines we have, it's nowhere near as large as a real network. But when you click into a vulnerable item, you can see that we're taking all the information we got from Tenable. And we're taking information from other sources as well. We can take in threat intel feeds. Like we have commercial integrations with products like Recorded Future. We have integrations with things like Shodan, right? And that gives us information on how exploitable this vulnerability is. Are there exploits in the wild? Is there a Metasploit plugin for it? And then we're taking that information, we're resolving it against our CMDB. right? And that's the whole operation side of the house. What's on the network? Is it healthy? How does it communicate? What does it rely on? How is that asset configured? And that's really invaluable because that gives us everything there is to know about this particular asset, and we're working off the same ground truth that all the other IT folks are. So even though we're in security, maybe we're off to the side, we aren't racking and stacking, right? We aren't painting stuff. We need to understand what's on that asset to do our job. So here we have a preview of the actual CMDB record inside the vulnerable item ticket. If I click that button, it takes me to the full record and just shows me everything there is. Now the cool thing is, now that we know everything that our organization knows about that asset, and we have everything Tenable is giving us, right? I added a field here to show that we are getting everything from Tenable, even if we don't necessarily default to parsing it out and putting it in a field. We can use all of that in our automation. So we can do things like build those remediation target rules. We can build assignment rules that automatically assigns these vulnerabilities to the correct teams to be fixed. We can track the dates. When was it first found? When was it last found? Is this a vulnerability that keeps reappearing, right? We even have some information like patch publications. All of this available in a single ticket. Now, when it comes to giving context around the vulnerability, we have this dependency view here. This chart right here opens a map. I pre-opened it. But it opens a map of the impacted host. Now, we do this in vulnerability response. We do this in security incident response. Truthfully, we do this all over the ServiceNow platform because it's so useful. As a security person, I can instantly see that my impacted host, sits between two switches, sits in front of a database, and a bunch of SQL servers.
Can you enlarge that just a little bit more, Matt, so we can see? That's much better.
A particular service or a program. So for instance, I may get a vulnerability or a security incident on some random server name, Fedora Work 29. That name doesn't really tell me a whole lot about what that server is or the importance of it. Well, I can open this map and I can instantly see that, oh, this rolls up to this analysis stack that supports, a weapons system, or it supports this major program in our agency, or some sort of critical eGov function. And I can get that business context right away along with my technical context. And this map tells us additional things as well. Like when I zoom in, there's these other icons by these different assets. These are telling me things like an IT incident was open, or there's a security incident open, there's some sort of alert going on. So I'm getting that very broad context all at once. Now that's all part of the root vulnerable item ticket. And these are generated automatically. We pull the results in from ACAS. It's very easy to go into Security Center and create the new user and generate your IP keys. And then within ServiceNow, you just go into the Tenable configuration modules and you enter your API credentials and a sort, and it schedules jobs. So these are created automatically. But the next really cool thing is the ability to group these vulnerabilities in any way you want, so that you can action them in bulk instead of one by one. So here I show a bunch of different vulnerability groups, and again, I kind of sorted these and filtered this view out and made the view I wanted and came up with these two groups I made. So you can see that the description of this group is all San Diego Windows vulnerabilities. These groups are controlled by filters. Now, yes, you can have a manual group where you add and remove things by yourself if you want to group things in a very, very specific way. But for this guy, I just made a group configuration where I am reading that CMDB, right? So I'm looking at the vulnerable items as they come in from ACAS. I'm looking at the location of that item, which would be a field in the CMDB, and I'm looking at the class. And I'm saying, look, if this asset, if this vulnerable host lives in San Diego and is a Windows server, group it in here. And then I'm automatically assigning all of these to the San Diego Windows Ops team. Within that Ops team, there's a handful of people within that team, and I just went ahead and picked Guillermo to receive these. In reality, as a vulnerability person, you might just assign it to the group and let them go ahead and assign it within their own team, or you can assign it to specific individuals. And here I can see that there's 233 different vulnerable items attached to this group. So that means there's 233 different machines out there with vulnerabilities in our system that are located in San Diego and are a Windows server. Now, likewise, I'll just move back. It is the same thing for Unix. Not everything is Windows, fortunately. Diversity is very important to security and life in general. So I built a similar group where all I did is I changed the class of machine from Windows to Unix. And that class is a hierarchy. I can be very specific. It all depends on how your CMDB is laid out, right? So you go from very broad classifications like, yes, this is a Windows server, or you can go very narrow and say this is, Windows Server 2012 or R5, and have that applied to your group. Now, once we have these groups, we can do things like kick off rescans of things. We can start our own investigations if there's a little bit of work we need to do. We can create a workflow to automatically do work around it. This workflow is a sample one we built called a vulnerability crisis. So you have a shell shock or a heartbleed, and you don't have time to wait on approvals, and you need to automatically notify all the seniors and kick up the dust. You can also create your change requests and other actions from here as well. And the nice thing about doing that is when you create changes or you push things to operations from a vulnerability group, you can push the group as a whole so that at the receiving end, on the ops side, the change side, whoever you're sending it to, isn't receiving 233 separate tickets. That's some big feedback we've gotten from customers, right? Your ops teams do not want a separate ticket for every single vulnerability, any more so than the vuln teams do. So you're pushing that vulnerable group over, and it refers back and lists all the individual vulnerabilities in it. So that's kind of a quick high level of how our vulnerability response application works. Customers love it. One of the things I love about vulnerability response is the processes tend to be very homogeneous across the entire DoD, even across the civilian government. And so customers tend to really like this right out of the box. And it's a very quick path to value because unlike other SOAR use cases, maybe where you're automating incident response, with security incident response, there might be lots of different playbooks involved. They may need to be developed. And there may be lots of different technologies that need to have different workflows and processes worked out with. With vulnerability response in the government, it's really about ACAS and kind of getting these kind of basic processes down. So are there any, I can't really see chat screens right now, but if there are any questions or comments or something else you want me to show in here, throw it in the chat. Otherwise, if there's nothing going on in the chat, guys, Bill, it's back to you.
Okay, well, I'll give everybody a minute or two if they want to ask a question, and then I will take over.
Great.
I don't see any questions coming through the Q&A pod at this time. So if you guys want to keep going, and I'll let you know if anything comes through.
Awesome.
Very good.
Thank you. Let me give me 1 second to stop sharing, and back to you, Bill.
All right, terrific. All right, so can everybody see my screen at this point?
Looks pretty good.
So, terrific. The question that was being answered by Matt, which is really, really effective, is how do you increase your ability to remediate vulnerabilities more effectively? And, obviously the vulnerability response capabilities that ServiceNow brings to the table is really, really terrific in helping us be able to track those vulnerabilities, be able to communicate with our operations team to go out and remediate those vulnerabilities. But then the question really becomes a lot of time, what if we can increase that speed even more by automating the process to remediate a vulnerability through the use of a workflow? And so the whole idea behind this is that as an operator, I live in what we like to call the operator workspace, all right? And the operator workspace really is an area within ServiceNow that allows me to understand all of my mission critical systems. All right, in this case, I've got a order status service, I've got rewards processing, and it immediately jumps out to me that I've got something critical going on in this environment. But that's not the focus of what I wanted to talk about. I'm just explaining this to you so you understand what you're seeing. The reality is that when a ticket is opened by a vulnerability response and gets sent to the operations team, this is basically what we see. We see the ticket and it talks about all the information that is actually going on within that environment. And what if at this point we had an automated response capability where the change comes in and says, we need to patch this vulnerability. Let's go ahead and set up a change, send that change to our change control board, get that approved, and get it sent automatically through the workflow to go ahead and kick off that remediation if it is a low risk type of software patch that needs to put in place. Now, with workflows or with orchestrations, we can do this automatically. Unfortunately, if I did it automatically, we wouldn't really see a whole lot, right? And I want to show you what's going on behind the scenes. So, typically what ends up happening is if I wanted to actually do a manual process, I'd set up my workflow and I would click on patch vulnerability. Well, rather than sit here and watch this actually percolate for 5 or 10 minutes, I went ahead and ran this ahead of time. The whole idea is with our workflow orchestration capability, which is low code or no code. What I mean by that, and I'll show you, is that if I wanted to create something, I can literally go in and set up an algorithm or a work flow that I want to put into place that is literally drag and drop. I actually go ahead and look at the items that I want to do. I pull those items into the environment and I then go ahead and run them. So I'm going to give you kind of a little 101 on this. Typically, workflows start off with some sort of trigger. Okay, vulnerability response sent me a ticket, or change management sent me a ticket saying, go ahead and patch this. Okay, so then at this point, I have the trigger, and then I go down and it's like, I need to take some actions. So typical actions might be, for example, I need to go ahead and create a change request record. I need to identify whether or not this is a Windows server or if it's a Linux server, as Matt described in vulnerability response. But each of these items literally has the capability of pulling in specific things that are related to the attributes in our CMDB for each configuration item, making this very simple to actually set up. As long as you understand what you want to do, we can pretty much do it within the workflow. Now, the whole idea behind this was I wanted to show you that this workflow ran. All right, it said, okay, I'm going to create a record. I'm doing something. Then the next thing it's going to say, was this a Windows server or was it Linux? Well, it came in, it looked at the Windows server and said, no, this isn't Windows, and it bails out of the algorithm at this point. Okay, it says, not Windows. I don't need to do any of this other fun stuff. But it comes down here with an else if you're a programmer. Okay, it's not Windows, but if it's Linux, let's go ahead and start doing some things. In this case, yes, it was a Linux server that needed to be patched. We need to log what we're doing. We need to match whether or not that vulnerability is tied to a specific configuration item. If it's matched, then I need to do a number of different things that is important to recording the process of the vulnerability being taken care of. And then I need to go ahead and deploy that software patch by working with our third-party systems. All right. In our environments, especially in DoD, you have a number of systems that you use for software patching. You may have SCCM, you may have WSUS, you may have BigFix. It just depends on the organization and what they have purchased to do that work. Sometimes it's a manual process, right? what we want to do with the workflow and this capability that we have with orchestration is to try and automate and be able to do that remediation in a much quicker time frame, be able to record everything that was done, be able to go back and audit and understand what happened, and then go back and do a final test, right? After my patch was deployed, if it was successful, let's go back and scan that system again. Let's verify that that patch was properly installed. And now that particular CI was automatically reporting back the new software patch version. And the whole idea here now is I can actually update the record and do all of this in an automated fashion. Um, in my history, patching a system manually took a better part of my workday. If I can even cut out 50% of what I needed to do from a very simple automated patch capability, it would be a big win in my book to be able to not only be able to remediate my systems faster, but also reduce the amount of time I, the operator, need to do in order to affect that change. So that's really what I wanted to show you today. We're getting close to that 50-minute mark that I was told that we needed to go to. I would like to open it up for any questions that you may have.
Awesome. Looks like we do have one question coming in at the moment. The question is, we cannot import directly from ACAS. Is there any other option for importing?
So when you were saying that you cannot set up ACAS to automatically send the results to, for example, ServiceNow, traditionally today you're dumping that all into an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV file, which can easily be imported into ServiceNow if you want to do that in a manual process. The whole idea really is we do have integrations today with ACAS, but if you're doing it manually and you want to continue that capability, we can support it.
Awesome, thank you. Looking to see if any other questions come in. Just as a reminder, everyone, we do have a Q&A pod on the left-hand side of your screen here. If you guys have any questions that we can directly answer for you now, or if you guys would like to see anything else in the demo, we do have our experts here and we're here to help, so let us know if you need anything.
So again, the whole idea behind the capability that we have with ServiceNow, vulnerability response is one area that we work together in, but understand that that workflow and orchestration capability works across the entire platform. So no matter what you may be doing in your environment, whether it be security or customer service or, for example, human resources, or any of the other functionalities that you may have from a business process, that workflow, that orchestration really ties everything together so that everybody now can work more efficiently.
Perfect, thank you. And does anybody have anything else to add? We don't have any more questions coming in, so if not, we can wrap up. Awesome.
Well, I will turn it back over. Yeah, go ahead, Brooke. I'm sorry.
No worries, not at all. I was just going to say, seems like we're good to go and wrap up here. I want to thank all of our participants as well as our speakers for being with us here today. We do appreciate it. On our screen here, you'll see some contact information for Evan Morgan. He's on our ServiceNow team here at Caresoft. Please reach out if you have any questions or would like to request a demo offline. We can help with that as well. Also, for our CPE credits, we do have some polling questions for you guys. If you don't mind taking a minute to answer, we would greatly appreciate it. Again, we do have our contact information, and we look forward to speaking with you guys and hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Thank you.
deal. Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody.